would be another way to say it. Mm-hmm.
Goes on to that too, but anyhow. So Moses' mom didn't want to contribute to the death toll. And she put Moses in a little basket that she built with tar and all. It would float, wouldn't sink, wouldn't leak. And put him in the Jordan River and let him go and hope that somebody would find him and take care of him. And it just happens that the Holy Spirit made sure that the Pharaoh's daughter, who was down at the river bathing, found this little boat and pulled Moses out, named Moses. Moses, I forget, means drawn out or something.
Something like that. Yes, good. You're doing a great job of the story.
The daughter kept Moses and brought him into the palace and raised him as her own. And he lived there and...
Perfect. You can stop right there because that's where we're going to pick up kind of in that area. So excellent narrative. And the reason why Pharaoh had done this is the end of Genesis, the beginning of Exodus. At the end of Genesis, the Jews are invited to come into Egypt and stay there because Joseph had done well by Pharaoh and had helped, welcome, sir. Had done well by Pharaoh because he had helped the Egyptians manage their bumper crops so that they could survive the 7 years of famine. And because Joseph had found favor in Pharaoh's eyes, Joseph's family and then ultimately the Hebrew people got to occupy and settle in Egypt. Now you have generations removed. The current Pharaoh doesn't care about the Egyptian or about the Jews. In fact, they're concerned because the Jews are populating like rabbits, and they've got so many Jews here, and we're concerned that they might take over, and this might become Hebrew land versus Egypt, and so that's why this edict came about. We're going to eliminate basically the next generation. But Moses was spared, as this good, well-remembered storyteller advised us. Pharaoh's daughter found the little boat, found the little boy. Had to have known this little boy was likely a Hebrew boy. Somehow she had compassion for him. Somehow Pharaoh, allowed it. Those parts of the story are a little uncertain, but Moses grows up in Pharaoh's palace. And then this inscription, so all that to say, in this room, this inscription, particularly the latter part of it, verses 24 through 26 of Hebrews 11 is where we are. And that part of the inscription talks about how Moses, despite having that residence, despite basically growing up and being raised in the Pharaoh's court and in the palace, or whatever you would call it, the place where Pharaoh lives, he took a stand. And so this room is titled Faith That Stands for Your Convictions. And so let's get to the actual story itself that's being referenced in this part of Hebrews 11. So why don't you go ahead, stick a finger or whatever in Hebrews 11 and go...
Could I ask a quick question?
Please. And yes, I am a docent. Thank you for knowing that.
Verse 23, just moving for a little about the parents. Parents saying they were not afraid of the king's edict.
Seems like they were, because why would they do this otherwise?
It's listed like that. So anyway, just an oddity.
A good question, sir, and I don't know that I can feel equipped to answer that question. But yeah, I would say this, not directly on point with that, but we're going to say, I think, if we're candid, and I want that, by the way, I want you all to be candid. When I'm asking you questions, I don't necessarily want to hear what you think, I want to hear, or the church answer, or whatever. I mean, I want you to be real, because one of the points of this museum and one of the points of Hebrews 11, I think, is not just to glorify certain individuals and their faith, but to inspire to look a little deeper and maybe find some flaws in their story, and maybe find that their faith wasn't as rock solid as the two verses summarize. If you get into the whole story, you see some stumbles along the way, and yet they still ended up having the level of faith that pleased God, and they end up being here. And so all that kind of touches on the point that this gentleman, I think your name is David. Did I meet you? Did I remember that correctly?
What was my name?
David? Yeah. Coach David. I think you told me you're a high school coach.
I mean, by faith, I think they put the child in the basket there, and that could be what, hey, it's going to work out by faith. So I'm not afraid of the king's edict because
right. Yet they behaved in a way that was responsive to the king's edict rather than just saying, the heck with you, king, talk to the hand. They definitely So, where is that faith? The author of Hebrews 11 found enough faith in that episode to call it out. I guess that's my best answer to your question. It's a good question. All right. Again, hold your finger or whatever in Hebrews 11. Go to Exodus 2. So way to your left, or if you're scrolling, I guess down. All right, excellent. Thank you. Guy with the camera who we learned last hour was Mark, so thank you, Mark. And I'm gonna need your help, Mark, just to roam around. I'd like for us we'll briefly chat about, and then we will read Exodus 2, 1 through 15. So and we're gonna chop that up into 3 sections. But Exodus 2 is much of what we discussed here, the birth of Moses, his being put in the basket, being rescued. So in fact, we're going to focus on 11 through 15 because that's the part of the story that we haven't yet heard. So let's go ahead and get a reader. Can somebody be my next reader? And Mark, the guy with the camera, can come over to you and make things a little easier for us. Okay, the lady in the back, Sharon, I believe is how she called herself a few hours ago. Go ahead. Exodus 2, 11 through 15, please.
Okay. One day when Moses had grown up, he went out to his people and looked on their burdens, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his people. He looked this way and that, and seeing no one, he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Then he went out the next day. Behold, 2 Hebrews were struggling together. And he said to the man in the wrong, "Why do you strike your companion?" And he answered, "What made you a prince and a judge over us? Do you mean to kill me as you did the Egyptian?" Then Moses was afraid, and he thought, "Surely the thing is known." When Pharaoh heard of it, he sought to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh and stayed in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much, Sharon. So in the beginning of the part that she read, it says that my dialect says years later, hers says one day. So I don't know what yours says, but it describes, the intention is sometime well after Moses is rescued and brought up in Pharaoh's court by Pharaoh's daughter. So he's been living the life of an Egyptian in the palace. I imagine that is a life of luxury. I imagine he's treated well and probably has all the fineries that, a relative of the king, so to speak, would have, and that's what Pharaoh is in the Egyptian culture. And yet, as he had grown up, back to verse 11, he observed, he went out to his own people. So we see in that verse, at least, that Moses is aware of something. What is he aware of? What does that verse tell us he's aware of? Yes, ma'am.
Jacobette, his mom, raised him for a few years.
That's true. That's true, yes. Recall in part of the story that the summary included when the Pharaoh's daughter rescued, she wasn't, we believe the reason why she tendered him to someone else is she wasn't capable of nursing. And she didn't just give birth, and so she wasn't anatomically ready to kind of raise this baby, and this little girl comes up and says, "Do you need help?" And the daughter says, "Absolutely, got someone in mind?" "Sure I do." It turns out it's Moses' mom. So yes, he's raised for a couple of years by his actual mama, lives with his actual sister, then goes and gets adopted. So how old he was, we would presume 1 to 2 years old, probably too young to have a full grasp of the fact that he's a Hebrew that's now being tendered to the Egyptian court to be living with Pharaoh. But according to this verse, when it says he went out to his people, somehow he has an awareness of that. So when he gets that awareness, we don't know what that does during the time he's living in Pharaoh's court. We don't know exactly, but he goes out to his own people as a clear indicator that Moses understands the folks that are out there in the fields and in the sand and doing the work of Pharaoh's taskmasters are really his people, and not Pharaoh, and not Pharaoh's daughter and all the other things. So he knows that, and he goes out here, and we see this story described, and 2 different encounters he had. Quick summary, what was the first encounter? Give me this, and I don't need the cameraman to roam around, just a quick summary, not the one in red, because she should know it real well. What happened the first time? He went out to his people. What did he see? What did he do? Just real quickly.
One of his people being beaten.
Yeah, and his response to that was?
He killed them and buried them.
All right, so he sees mistreatment of his people. The Egyptian taskmasters doing, physically physically directing this worker, by beating, whatever that means, Moses decides to act on that to the tune that he actually kills the Egyptian taskmaster. Goes out the next day, what happens?
Two Hebrews fighting.
All right, 2 Hebrews are fighting this time, and what?
What are you doing?
All right, yeah. So he kind of inquired. I mean, basically, it's like, hey, it's one thing for the Egyptians to be beating up on us, but we don't need to be beating up on each other. Stop that. And they.
And it backfires on them.
Quite. And what? Hang on, the gentleman next to you.
Looking at my notes, and it says in Acts 7:23 that he was 40 years old when he did that.
Okay. Interesting.
But then the Hebrews said, you're not the boss of me.
Yeah. And you're going to kill us like you killed that Egyptian yesterday? Well, that got Moses' attention. Uh-oh, these guys know about that. Who else knows about that? Now I'm concerned. So much so that he fears for his life. Turns out he has a right to fear for his life because Pharaoh's out to get him. He flees. So that's kind of the basic story that is alluded to, if your finger is still in Hebrews 11, alluded to in verses 24. By faith Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter and chose to suffer with the people of God rather than enjoy the short-lived pleasure of sin. All right, I just told you, disclaimer-wise, I want to hear genuine answers, not the church answers. So what do we think of Moses' faith, just reading the Exodus 2:11 through 15 account? What does that strike you as in terms of a faith episode? Just your feedback comes really.
Killed somebody.
Yeah, all right. That's, that's kind of a negative thing, I would say, generally. You're not usually commended for that. Even though there is mistreatment going on, there's, I understand that lawyers are fond of like due process and rights and things. So, there's probably some mechanism to deal with that other than just your own vigilante killing this guy. You had a comment, sir.
I'm sure, I believe that Moses saw that
This isn't going to be a church answer, is it? Okay.
every single day. Obviously, the taskmasters wanted the work done, and they had to push very hard many days for the Hebrews to get the bricks made and all that. And I think he was fed up. I'm sort of surprised, to be honest with you, that the 2 Hebrews that he saw fighting amongst themselves should have shown more gratitude because he eliminated one of the issues. But I don't know.
Yeah, they're hot.
Preservation kicked into, that sort of thing. It was just like we saw as they went out in the desert. Why are we here? Let's go back. So maybe they rather make bricks than,
Then who knows?
Yeah.
Door number 2, yeah, right. Okay. I will tell you, and I'm agreeing with it, I would tell you in all candor, despite my being a docent, this doesn't scream like a great faith episode to me. It screams like maybe, justice served, but in a vigilante sense, which I think is generally not good. And then he's called out, and he's so afraid for his life that he runs. That does not sound like poster child, God-honoring faith to me, in all candor. But the Hebrews 11 passage commends essentially that episode of refusing to be raised in Pharaoh's court and all this stuff as an issue of faith, that's worthy to be in the Hebrews 11 Hall of Faith. So why is that? Some folks would look at the Hebrews 11 description and characterize it as overly generous, overly favorable, a false narrative. Obviously, we disagree. This is the Hall of Faith, and this gigantic statue that you see over here, twice life size, of Moses, is to depict that he did take a stand, and he stood for his convictions. So how do we marry the two? Another thought? Yes, sir.
Okay, Hebrews is written by, we don't know, but many, many years way after this incident, hundreds of years. So it is more of looking through the rearview mirror over centuries, as opposed to Exodus was written by Moses, the man who experienced all of this, which was firsthand. So I think there are 2 different ways of looking at it, from the man who experienced it and a man who, through history, is looking at it.
Excellent. That's a great answer. And I was going to kind of go in that direction, so you stole my thunder a little bit, but I'm happy that you did. That was really good. No, you're good. Okay, sir.
Well, in Acts
we're told that he did this because he was expecting that the people would see him as their leader, as their savior. So, I mean, Acts 7 says, now when he was 40, it came into his heart to visit them, and seeing one of them suffer wrong, he defended and avenged him, and struck down the Egyptian. For he supposed that his brethren would have understood that God would deliver them by his hand, but they did not understand.
Interesting. Yeah, and who is his? Is the his God's hand or Moses' hand?
Moses' hand.
Yeah, but as an instrument of God, I think is the analogy. Excellent point. I have a similar answer to this question that I've posed to you, and it's found in 2 Timothy. So we're going to go there, because this is a verse that's, I would say, fundamental to the entirety of our Hall of Faith, particularly as it relates to the relevance of Hebrew 11 or anything else. So 2 Timothy 3. If I could get one reader to read one verse, actually two verses, 16 and 17. 2 Timothy 3, 16 and 17. Show me by hand who the reader is. All right. Yes, sir, Mr. Patrick, go ahead. 16 through 17, 2 Timothy chapter 3.
All Scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be perfect, thoroughly furnished unto all good works.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much, sir. So we believe that Scripture is to be trusted, that Scripture is accurate, that Scripture is divinely inspired, is of God. He used many different writers. He is the author. He is the one who informed the writers what to write. They wrote it. He preserved it so that we can be sitting here in the year 2025 reading the same Scripture that was originally written millennia ago. Why is it relevant to my question? Along the lines of what both these gentlemen, but certainly the first one indicated, is that we have a different writer. We definitely have a different time frame. And what we would say in the Hebrews 11 Hall of Faith, and encourage you to say as you encounter similar conundrums as you read through the Bible, that the God-inspired author of Hebrews 11 was informed of things that weren't necessarily clear in Exodus chapter 2 to the reader. Hebrews 11 is indicating and identifying that that episode was a faith-inspired episode. We could look at it as somebody of privilege sees, and he sees an injustice and wants to fix it, and then he gets scared for his life and runs. That doesn't seem particularly heroic. From a faith perspective, the Hebrews 11 writer is calling this out as a tremendous act of faith, and in fact so much so that it's going to be in the Hebrews 11 Hall of Faith. Why is that? Is it really a false narrative? No, it's not. We think the Hebrews 11 passage is a supplement to the story, an accurate, God-divine supplement to the story. And when you read it, and we hired a couple of folks call out passages in Acts as well, which further supplement the story. When you read Hebrews 11 and Exodus 2 in the context of Hebrews 11 and maybe Acts 7 even, you see a fuller portrayal of what really happened in Exodus 2. So we don't think that the artist who created this statue in this room that's boasting of Moses standing for his convictions as being an act of faith is, in fact, we don't believe it is an overstatement. We believe it's true and accurate, and we believe so because Hebrews 11 tells us that, and Hebrews 11 is also God-inspired, as was Exodus 2, Acts 7, and any other page you would look at and stick your finger at. All of it's God-inspired. So if indeed this is an act of faith, as we believe it is, let's kind of contemplate that a little bit. Let's step back and look at the Exodus 2 passage from those lenses. We see somebody, again, I kind of alluded to it, Moses is growing up in Pharaoh's court. He's an Egyptian for all practical purposes, but apparently he knows otherwise. And he could just sit there and eat the grapes and have the people fanning him, whatever the things they do, as you're in Pharaoh's court, you just do much of nothing, and everybody's at your beck and call, and you ring a bell, and he could be doing that, living that life, but he appears to be aware of the Hebrew people. He appears to be aware of their plight, their suffering, their poor treatment, so much so that he goes out to his people. We see that called out twice in Exodus, and there's a suggestion from some in our group that maybe he's done it a lot more than twice. We're just told about these two particular episodes, and he feels the injustice, and apparently he feels by faith that this is an injustice that needs a stand against, that need the convictions to do something about this injustice by faith. And you had a hand up. Yes, ma'am.
When you read this, the way that...
Which this? Exodus 2?
The Exodus.
Okay.
When it says glance, it was important enough for that to be written down. Glancing this way or that, you just have this bit like he didn't want to be seen.
Yeah.
Not necessarily didn't, as a leader, I'm going to fix this injustice. It was like, yikes, I'm going to look around and now I'm going to kill him and hide him in the sand. So it eventually obviously was found out, and whether
Right.
it was God's plan for the whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it was, but almost like a cowardice type thing, which I would have not thought of for him.
Right.
It's not like the movie, you know, he's Moses. This little person looking left and right. So.
Yeah, good point. And we know that it appears he didn't want that to be known because it got scared of his mind the next day when they knew about it. And this wasn't social media. He couldn't, blast it on, whatever. So somehow word had spread to these two other Hebrews that are now knowing that he killed somebody, and what, are you going to kill one of us? Is that what you do now, guy? You come out here and you kill people? No, in fact, I'm going to run for cover because I'm scared for my life. You had your hand up.
Yes, sir. Could it be possible that Moses is looking at fighting tyranny and treachery with tyranny and treachery? Because the overall disagreement here is the people of God, covenant agreement, identified specifically as Israelites, who they're different than everybody else because of their covenant agreement with Yahweh. And Egypt and every other nation is disobedient to Yahweh, refuses to acknowledge Yahweh, or be submissive to him, subservient to him, and instead decides to turn their spear against the people of Yahweh. That's tyranny and treachery. And I understand Yahweh allows this to go along, but Moses probably, with a good streak of insubordination, is also with a good streak of, shall we say, loyalty to Yahweh.
Believing loyalty, I think. I've heard that once or twice in this room. Yes,
But
excellent.
I do like how the lady mentioned that he looks this way and that. Well, he knows this is wrong. He knows. There's no doubt. But there's also no doubt that he'll stand for it no longer.
Yeah, and there again, according to the Hebrews 11 supplement and clarification, there also appears to be no doubt that this was a faith-motivated action. And we could argue, and I would be candid and say, probably a poorly executed demonstration of faith. I don't know that murder was what God had in mind, but this was the beginning of Moses really fully taking a stand. Yes, he does flee. I'll get you just a second. Yes, he does flee, apparently for his life. He does come back, a good time later now to face the new Pharaoh, the son of, probably his sibling for all practical purposes. Now that Pharaoh's dead, and the next Pharaoh is likely the guy that he shared lunch with and, played toys with or whatever else. Now he shows up with him as the spokesperson for the Hebrew people and challenges the authority of Egypt over those people. So he definitely has a process where the faith moment starts in Exodus 2, and then yields to what we're going to be discussing more in about 40 minutes when we get to our next room after we finish this room when you have your break. How long is the break that we have between rooms, sir?
10 minutes.
10 minutes, right. After we have your 10-minute break, then we'll come back and we'll focus on that. But this room is a precursor, a stepping stone for that, and we're going to hit that a second. I saw a hand here and a hand there. Sharon.
So my question is,
Okay.
this is not going to come out right.
Did I talk past your question?
Faith in what?
Okay.
I know faith in who, but I'm like, you asked, faith of, faith God was going to forgive him, faith, what?
Yeah.
I mean,
No.
what fill in the blank?
It's a good question.
At this point, he doesn't know that he's going to become a servant of God. I mean, or God's going to use him to lead a nation.
I would just clarify, say the narrative doesn't tell us that he knows. Maybe he does know, but the narrative doesn't call that out.
Right, it doesn't.
Moses wakes up being called of God to go out to his people and right or wrong. There was nothing, it doesn't say that. So,
Right. What was he having?
Good question.
Faith.
Again, the design of this room was to call out what we believe to be standing for his convictions. What exactly that looks like in terms of the specific faith is a good question, maybe to be determined kind of on an individual basis. But it does, it clearly appears that he was offended by this behavior of the Egyptian and wanted to fix it, wanted to do right by it, and was willing, I would say, despite that he was looking around left and right. I mean, just the fact of doing this, I think he was willing to suffer the consequence of maybe no longer getting to live in the palace, and maybe no longer getting to have grapes when he snaps his finger and someone's fanning him because it's a little hotter that day, and all the things that come with being in Pharaoh's court. Maybe he's willing to go and be with his people, not just go out there and visit them and then go back to the lap of luxury. You had your hand up, Patrick.
I was just, it made me think about Exodus 21:20. If a man smite his servant or his maid with a rod, and he die under his hand, he shall be surely punished for taking revenge or vengeance against that person. And it goes on, with the eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth.
Right.
With some of the other descriptions that were being put in place eventually by Moses.
Yes. Yeah, right. This guy.
Jesus changed a few things.
What is murder really? It's more than just the act, it's the thought. Yeah. Excellent. Good. Yes, sir.
I'm wondering if the two Hebrews that were fighting and he broke up the fight thought of him as an Egyptian as opposed to one of theirs. And that's why they said what they did. And also, he looked left and right when he killed the Egyptian. I think his issue was a whole bunch of other Egyptians showing up and doing a number on him.
Right.
As opposed to his people.
And I would agree. I mean, part of me thinks, although the latter verses of that Exodus 2 passage indicates maybe otherwise, but part of me thinks, as Pharaoh's son, he probably had the ability to kind of, I would think, maybe escape some of the consequence that just a regular Egyptian would have for doing that. I mean, you're the son of the king. I don't know. Anyway, he does this. He sees his life as in peril because of choices he made, which apparently were faith motivated, according to Hebrews 11. He fled. He's no longer living in a lap of luxury. I want to kind of pause here because I want us to do something else in this room that's important and is right now escaping your visual abilities. Before I do that, I want to offer a pop quiz. I did one earlier, but it really didn't count. This one has some teeth to it. I'm gonna put the question out there. I'm going to allow 10 seconds. If somebody answers the question correctly within those 10 seconds, you all will get passes to a free beverage at the Manna Cafe, which you've seen. And I can tell you, they've got lattes. I know you American people, we American people like that. They've got smoothies even, milkshakes I think they have. It'll be good. If the question's answered correctly, then I'm sorry about that. But with that, the question is, and then I'm going to start a 10-second countdown. Who were Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah? Oh, a hand came up real quickly.
Daniel's friends, who eventually became Shadrach, Meshach, and
Okay, excellent. Yes, that was the Hebrew name for the gentlemen that were renamed Babylonian, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Very good. You can thank Mr. Patrick for your free beverage at the Manna Cafe for the next, when you get your 10-minute break, go there. I'll give you a voucher. You can claim your prize. Good job. Why am I talking about them? I need two helpers, and I've got a list from the registration. Can I have a Dina and a Wendy? I understand that both of you are here. Can you all come up, Dina and Wendy? Come on, Wendy. Yep, you can do it. She's thinking if I don't come, maybe he thinks I'm not here. I know you're here. All right, I promise it's good. You're going to like it. Can you give one of these to like people in that half of the room? Can you do the same to that half of the room? All right, don't put these on yet. These are special glasses that you'll see what they do here in a little bit. I mean, you know, we at the Hebrews 11 Hall of Faith like to pull some tricks every now and then and use some technology to get your attention.
We get to keep these?
You get to keep these, yes, sir. I don't want them back. I don't want them back.
Will we need them in the next room?
Well, I mean, you're here all day, so it's not like you're going to go anywhere. But their usefulness is particular. Let's be sure that the guy with the camera, Mr. Mark, gets one of these too. Do we have enough? Did we get enough? Everybody's got one? Okay, perfect. Thank you, ma'am. See, I didn't put you in harm's way, did I? Okay, thank you. All right. What is this about? Okay, so again, you can clearly see this massive statue over here, twice life size, showing Moses. And by the way, before we get into the glasses thing, I will tell you that the sculptor spent a great deal of time trying to convey through the facial expressions. He spent like a third of the time on this entire statue on Moses' face, trying really to communicate the complexity of the faith that Moses was dealing with and exuding when he took this stand for conviction. So as you're walking around 10 minutes, even though some of that's going to be going to a Manna Cafe, thanks to Mr. Patrick, just kind of consider that and maybe take a gander at the complexity of Moses' faith as intended to be demonstrated by his facial expressions. But why do I have these glasses? That answers the question that you surely are asking. Why are these walls just barren? Why do we have it basically what looks like an empty room except for a statue? And we have an answer here with these glasses. So put these glasses on, and then you're going to see something dramatic. Everybody put them on. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? So take the glasses off. See the difference? Glasses off, glasses back on. I know it. I know it. What you're looking at is a transformation of this statue of Moses that is, the typical bronze statue to being gold. And what you should see, if your glasses are working correctly, on the walls is a massive mural of gobs of people on their face. If you look real closely, kind of behind the statue, so some of you may not have perfect view of it, but somewhat behind the statue, you can see three figures standing up. Those three figures are okay, the VeggieTales version, Rakshak and Benny, the Babylonian version, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or their original Hebrew names, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. I'm going to take these off because I'm on camera. You guys aren't, so you can keep them on. I'm feeling like that's looking kind of silly for a while. Okay, so this is another story that we feel speaks to the same point. Standing for your convictions. You're welcome to keep your glasses on. I know some of you are. It's fun. I tell you, man, they're awesome. It's technology. I can't tell you how it works. I just know it works. It's something that you have to be here at the exhibit to really fully see, although these three gentlemen are alluded to in Hebrews 11, so I don't want you to think that we're running amok at Hebrews 11 Hall of Faith and adding things that aren't here. But we wanted to use this room to portray the faith to stand for your convictions using not just Moses' story, but using the story that's depicted through your magic glasses of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, refusing to bow down as the masses of others that your glasses revealed did when called to do so to this gold statue. That episode is found in, we're going to go there, in the book of Daniel, chapter 3. We're going to kind of quickly highlight that book or that story. I suspect many in this room are somewhat familiar with that. In the interest of time, I'm going to kind of run through it on the quick end. But if you go to Daniel 11, Daniel's toward the end of the Old Testament. It's one of the prophet books that can kind of get lost if you turn your pages too fast. Probably not so much if you have a digital Bible. You can just click the button. But when you get to Daniel, get to chapter 3. While you're doing that, I'll set the stage. I think this is Judah. Yeah, Judah is conquered by the Babylonians. This is part of God's judgment. The Israelites had been conquered, I think, by Assyria and deported. The Judah was left because they were just a slightly bit more faithful and long-lasting in God's eyes, but they also faltered. God sent judgment through King Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians. So the people that were left in the Promised Land were taken. King Nebuchadnezzar specifically wanted choice young men from the captives to be identified and trained up so that they could be useful to the king's court. And for them that were so designated were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The latter three were renamed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego by their Babylonians. So that's why these guys are here. That's kind of what happens in Daniel 1 and 2. And in Daniel chapter 3, where you all should be at this point, we have an interesting encounter. So this is when King Nebuchadnezzar gets this wild idea. Well, in fact, let's read it. It kind of launches right. Verse 3, I'll do the reading. Verse 1 of chapter 3 of the book of Daniel. King Nebuchadnezzar made a gold statue 90 feet high and 9 feet wide. He set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. King Nebuchadnezzar assembled everybody. I'm kind of now doing the Cliff Notes version. Jump to verse 4. A herald loudly proclaimed, people of every nation and language, you are commanded. When you hear, people of every nation and language, what does that mean? That means, Babylon is a powerhouse at the time. So he's not just saying fellow Babylonians. He's saying fellow Babylonians, all the other people that we captured and brought here because we're better than you and we've dominated the world, so to speak. So he's talking to a multitude of peoples of different languages and nations. Back to the verse. You are commanded, when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, drum, and every kind of music, you are to fall down and worship the gold statue that Nebuchadnezzar has set up. But whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a furnace of blazing fire. So that's what this episode, that's what your magic glasses are showing you right now, is the moment that the zither, lyre, harp, drum, flute, whatever, all those things sounded, boom. Everybody hits the ground on their face. Why? Because the king said so. And frankly, because most of these people are probably used to doing such things in front of such contraptions like gold statues that are purportedly the latest god, and we're going to bow down. Probably these people didn't have much problem with that because that's sort of their normal behavior. 3 guys did have a problem with that because it's not their normal behavior. They don't bow down to gold statues or anything that's made of man. They bow down to Yahweh only. So these guys stand, despite this edict from the king and despite the dire consequence that is spelled out. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a furnace of blazing fire. So we know these guys stand. They get ratted out by some fellow Babylonians. By the way, so these 3 in Daniel are elevated to positions of prominence in King Nebuchadnezzar's court because they have proven to be quite effective. They're good learners, they're obedient, they're faithful to their responsibilities, and they're effective at their job. And so the Babylonians are like, dang, what are these Jews here taking our jobs? Well, let's get rid of them. And so here's a chance. They got 3 of them, let's get rid of them. O king. This is real impressive. If you look over there, you can see there's 3 guys that are standing. What? So the king gets outraged, calls him here. Let's pick up the story because this is a really great story. Verse 14, Nebuchadnezzar asked them, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, is it true that you don't serve my gods or worship the gold statue I have set up? Now, if you're ready, when you hear the sound of all those instruments, fall down and worship the statue I made. But if you don't worship it, you will be immediately thrown into a furnace of blazing fire. And who is the God who can rescue you from my power? Recall their answer? Generally, what was their answer?
No.
All right, and I'm very simplistic. No, that's the Cliff Notes version. No, there's a little more to it than that, but basically we're not going to do that. I think one of the more powerful aspects of their answer is they say, we have faith in the God, we're not going to do this crazy thing. We believe God will rescue us. But even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we're not going to bow down to this statue, with all due respect, we're not going to do that, basically. Sharon's version, no. so they don't do it. King gets outraged, crank up the furnace. They do, 7 times its normal heat. The guys that throw them in die because it's so hot and fire's just raging out of this thing that it kills, the workers that are sending these Jews to their death. And you know the rest of the story. They end up walking around untied, unscathed, come out without even the smell of smoke on them, and King Nebuchadnezzar has what would appear a worship moment as a result, and a new declaration. Folks who badmouth the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you're going to die, because he has shown himself worthy, essentially, blah, blah. All right, so that's the stand. That's a very powerful, well-known, and it is alluded to toward the end of Hebrews 11, faith to stand for your convictions. These 3 guys did that. As well-known as that story is, we think, and we're going to wrap up our time in this room here in a few minutes, we think that episode does not happen but for a lesser known, and I would say lesser significant episode that happened in Daniel chapter 1. So you should be in chapter 3 of Daniel, so just turn to your left a couple of pages or scroll up if you're using a phone. Chapter 1 is, again, the part about Daniel and these three other guys who are among the captives from Judah being called out and being designated as potentially useful to King Nebuchadnezzar. King Nebuchadnezzar appears in some respects to be, it's hard to call him benevolent when his nation is conquering other nations, but his plan for at least the ones that are designated is you're gonna eat here, you're gonna get good food, and we're gonna treat you right, we're gonna educate you. Yes, it's for self-gain, but you're gonna have a pretty good experience being a captive in our country. We don't know what exactly the diet was, but the diet that was being proposed in the middle of chapter 1, particularly in verse 8, was something that offended Daniel, likely because it offended the purity rules and regulations that God had for his people. So I don't know if they were being fed pork or, I don't know what exactly it was, but there was something that wasn't right to these three guys, even though the king says, here's what you're going to eat because I'm treating you great and I'm going to educate you and you're welcome. And they say, eh. So verse 8, Daniel determined that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine he drank. So he asked permission from the chief official to not defile himself. He essentially enlisted Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. I don't know them by these names. I have to kind of remind myself. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He enlists these other guys to kind of join him in this likely vegetarian crusade. We're not going to eat this meat. And the servant's very scared. He says, if I don't give you this, so he says, Mr. Servant, we don't want your steak, we don't want your pork tenderloin, whatever it is, we don't want that. Just give us the choices of your vegetables and we'll be happy. And the servant's thinking, if I feed these guys what they're asking for and they show up all sickly and not strong or whatever else, and the king looks at that and wonders why they this way didn't get the same food, and now the king's looking at my head and it may be removed from my body. I don't want that. No, that's a big risk. I don't want to do what you say. Daniel persuades. He's very persuasive. Apparently, says just I tell you what, just give us a couple weeks. I'm thinking the servant says, okay, and you know what? I think I'm going to eat the prime rib and the pork tenderloin and whatever else. So I'm not going to put it in the trash. So I'll eat it while these guys are eating carrots and beets and whatever else. And turns out they eat, and they're as healthy as ever, and they're the best looking in terms of fitness and overall health. The king commends them for this, so they decide, this is great. So why am I telling you about this story? I believe that the courage, the faith that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego demonstrated by standing for their convictions in chapter 3, by being three guys out of a multitude of people who were on their face, and these three guys aren't when the king says, bow to the statue or die. I think that faith is ignited back in chapter 1 when they take a little, I don't want to belittle it, but their first act of faith is to choose to eat vegetables instead of pork, instead of steak, instead of whatever it is. And God saw that, God rewarded them for that, and I believe that faith inspired not only those three guys, but inspired Daniel himself. Because recall later on, Daniel had a similar peril. He was supposed to pray only to, and it wasn't Nebuchadnezzar at that point, it was King Darius, a successor king. You pray to me only for 30 days, and he did what he always did and prayed 3 times facing Jerusalem, and they got caught, tossed in the lion's den, survived. I think those guys' faith started in chapter 1 when they decided, I'm not going to eat this pork. Again, not a life threat. This is not the same as defying the king like they did later on. I guess it is, but defying the king and not what you put in your mouth as opposed to just refusing to do what the king says. This faith episode in chapter 1, we believe in this museum, fueled the other, bolder, more courageous, more impactful faith. All that to say, right here in this room, if your glasses are now off, now you're looking at the large statue of Moses. We believe that this faith that Moses demonstrated in Exodus chapter 2 to take a stand, to go see his people, see the mistreatment of his people, and do something about it, again, maybe poorly executed, but a faith-driven position to take a stand, fueled the rest of Moses' life. Fuel what we see in the next room where he becomes the true hero that we know him to be. leading his people out of Egypt and crossing the sea on dry land and all the other things that make Moses truly very worthy of having multiple rooms in this museum. Faith that pleases God sometimes starts small. Sometimes starts with an everyday thing. The choice of what you'll eat for dinner, or perhaps the choice for what you watch on TV, or whatever the thing may be. You're being friendly to your coworker despite the fact that they keep eating your food in the refrigerator. Whatever it is that's going on in your world, faith like that, faith that can start small, that can seem largely minimal or irrelevant, maybe it is or isn't, but oftentimes that first step of faith encourages you to take the next step of faith, and the one after that. And with each step of faith that you survive to take the next, it often encourages you to be a little more bold and a little more assertive in that faith. And maybe at the end of your path or in the middle of your path, you're taking what you would never dream of taking in terms of a step of faith back at the beginning. You didn't feel you had it in you to do something as significant as standing when everybody else is bowing, or righting a wrong, or the things that are really called out in this faith, in this museum. So we like this. I mean, we like every room in this museum. I don't want to suggest that we have favorites, but one of the things, and we've seen it a little bit alluded to in some of the other rooms, but one of the things that we feel is most important about this room is not necessarily the particular act of faith that is depicted in this statue, although it's very important, but more so that this act of faith, we believe, preceded and inspired successive acts of faith, bolder acts of faith, being more an instrument of God than in the beginning, and in fact rescuing people and all the magnificent things that Moses' life is most well known for. So the motivator to us is that next act of faith that's in front of you that seems insignificant, do it. It's probably going to inspire you to do the next one and the one after that, and certainly you're going to become somebody that God's looking down and is very happy with. Let me close with some prayer. God, thank you for giving us the opportunity to evaluate faith that takes a stand for conviction. Surely we have plenty of opportunity to do that in our daily life, in our workplaces. Perhaps a boss is asking us to do something, or coworkers are wanting us to participate in a thing that we know to be wrong. And there's pressure to cave into that, to keep our job, or to keep friendships or whatnot, whether it's a neighborhood interaction, maybe even within the family. Lord, give us the ability to be strong enough in our faith to stand for our conviction, to stand for moral right, to stand for you, trusting that you will see that it will please you, and that you might allow us the chance to do that again and again and again thereafter, and become people who do that habitually. Thank you for this museum, for this time to be here, for these folks here with me on this tour. I pray that you continue to speak to us as we continue to dwell on Hebrews chapter 11. In your name we pray. Amen. Enjoy your 10 minutes and enjoy the free beverage. Thanks to Mr. Patrick at the Manna Cafe.